In this day and age, chemotherapy as a primary form of treatment for many kinds of cancers is taken for granted, but you may be surprised to learn just where chemotherapy originated. That is, in the trenches of World War I and World War II. In this episode, we'll talk about chemical warfare and how it led to the most common cancer treatment today. Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Me, Myself, and I History, where weird history and strange happenings are always on the menu. My name is Seraphim. Today, we'll present the first of a two-part arc related to one man who is intimately connected to the topic of this episode and the next one, so stay tuned. While mustard agents may have been created as early as 1822 by Césaire Mansuet d'Esperds, neither he nor another 19th century chemist, Alfred Riche, noted any irritating qualities. It wasn't until 1860 when British scientist Frederick Guthrie noted the irritating qualities of a mustard agent he developed for agriculture after he tasted it. The same year, German scientist Albert Niemann noted the blistering effects of a similar mustard agent. In 1866, yet another German scientist, Victor Meyer, created a very concentrated form that produced very good yields on crops as a fertilizer, but had significantly stronger irritant effects on users. Meyer had his compound tested on laboratory rats, most of which died. Just before World War I, English chemist Hans Thatcher Clark replaced phosphorus trichloride in Meyer's formulation with hydrochloric acid. When one of his vials broke, he was hospitalized for 2 months with burns. The report of the new formulation and its result made its way back to Germany, where it inadvertently set Germany on the road to chemical warfare after the First World War broke out the next year. Fritz Haber was born in 1868 in Breslau, Prussia, modern-day Wrocław, Poland. He received a classical education where he took an early interest in chemistry. He studied that subject first at the University of Berlin and then later at the University of Heidelberg in 1886. He eventually received a doctorate and a post as a professor of chemistry and electrochemistry at Karlsruhe Institute of Technology. Agriculture in the 19th century had made great strides due to discoveries in mechanical, biological, and chemical science. Scientists knew that nitrogen was important for plant growth, and without sufficient nitrogen, soils would deplete and become useless for growing food. The major sources of agricultural nitrogen in that period were niter, which is the mineral form of potassium nitrate, and bird guano, both mined principally from tropical islands. Scientists of that day also warned that these sources would soon be insufficient for feeding the world's growing population and would eventually be depleted, leaving little or nothing in its place. This is where Fritz Haber stepped up. He took the claims of his fellow scientists very seriously. Haber's quandary was that while mineral and biological sources of nitrogen were slowly depleting, the atmospheric nitrogen that composes 78% of our atmosphere is very stable and does not react with other elements readily. How to tap into this, a very abundant source of nitrogen, and feed the planet was Haber's problem. He succeeded by using high-pressure and catalyst materials. Haber was able to produce usable ammonium nitrate at laboratory scale in 1909. The problem now was the scale. His laboratory model only produced about 125 milliliters, or 4 U.S. fluid ounces per hour, barely enough for a few potted houseplants. Still, Haber was hailed as a minor hero for his breakthrough. In 1910, the German chemical company BASF bought the process, and the task of upscaling the process to industrial production levels was given to Haber's brother-in-law, Karl Bosch. The industrial-scale production took years to develop, but in 1913 the process was revealed. From then on, it would widely be known as the Haber-Bosch process. The world could be fed with a reliable supply of atmospheric nitrogen. Today, about half the world is still fed with food grown with Haber-Bosch process fertilizers. In addition to being a brilliant chemical scientist, Fritz Haber was a German patriot through and through. He was even a signatory of the infamous Manifesto of the 93 in favor of the German side of World War I. He also took a uniformed position as a junior officer with the German War Ministry at the outbreak of the war. He was convinced that Germany needed to begin using chemical weapons despite treaty obligations against it in the Hague Conventions. According to one biographer, Haber reputedly said, "If you want to win the war, then please wage chemical warfare with conviction." And after great difficulty, he got chlorine gas used on the battlefield in 1915. His endorsement of chemical warfare caused his wife, also a chemist herself, to declare that he had perverted the purpose of science. She called it barbaric, and she became estranged from him. Later that year, she would commit suicide in protest with his officer's pistol one evening after a garden party in his honor by shooting herself in the heart. The next day, he deployed to the Eastern Front to teach troops how to use his chlorine gas weapon against the Russians, but that's a topic for our next video. By 1917, at the Third Battle of Ypres, also known as the Battle of Passchendaele, mustard gas, weaponized and delivered in artillery shells with Haber's help, had been used. After the war in 1918, Haber won the Nobel Peace Prize for his work on ammonium nitrate fertilizer. His brother-in-law Bosch would win it in 1931. Fritz Haber would go on to earn many honors in science, and he was never tried for any war crimes. His awards and honors notwithstanding, today he is only typically remembered as the father of chemical warfare. Haber was a Christian who had converted from Judaism many years earlier. When the Nazis came to power and instituted the Nuremberg laws, Haber resigned from the Karlsruhe Institute and left Germany. It was only his death in 1934 that prevented him from seeing Zyklon B, created in the very laboratory that he oversaw, used against the Jews in the concentration camp system. So, what does all this have to do with chemotherapy? During World War II, pharmacologist Alfred Gilman and Louis Goodman were both postdoctoral fellows at Yale University. They were also good friends. They researched pharmacology together. While still affiliated with Yale, Gilman took a position as section chief at the U.S. Army's Edgewood Arsenal, studying the effects of nitrogen mustard. World War II was in full swing, and there was some fear that chemical agents might be reintroduced by an increasingly desperate Germany. A year into their research, a German air raid on Bari, Italy led to more than 1,000 U.S. sailors and others being exposed to mustard agents. The secret cargo of mustard gas bombs on board the Liberty ship, the USS John Harvey, had been damaged. Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Francis Alexander, a physician and expert in chemical warfare at the time, was dispatched to conduct an investigation into the aftermath. Autopsies revealed both lymphoid and myeloid tissue suppression in the victims. In other words, white blood cells and bone marrow tissues were damaged. This led Lieutenant Colonel Alexander to theorize that the mustard gas had suppressed the growth of certain types of tissues. Gilman and Goodman soon used this discovery that nitrogen mustard agent exposure resulted in lowered white blood cell counts to question whether this might be useful in treating lymphomas. To test this, they first established lymphomas in lab mice and then demonstrated that these lymphomas could be treated with the mustard agents. Then, with the help of Dr. Gustav Lenskog of the Yale University School of Medicine, Gilman and Goodman located a willing patient with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. They injected the patient with a weaker but less volatile mustard agent called mustine. The patient's tumor mass is significantly reduced. Additional treatments were still needed, but this breakthrough was the first pharmaceutical treatment of cancer. The study, conducted in 1943, was published in 1946. After 1946, the use of chemical compounds called cytotoxins and alkylating agents became widespread in the treatment of cancer and eventually in some other conditions like certain types of renal disease. So there you have it. Without Fritz Haber's mustard gas weapons, the U.S. Army Edgewood Arsenal would not have begun to research the effects of the weapon. Without the German air raid on Bari, Italy that damaged a secret shipment of mustard gas bombs during World War II, it might have been much later that someone noticed this effect on lymphomas, if at all. These events led to the bright idea that it might be useful in treating a cancer of the blood. Although the initial patient reportedly died anyway, the discovery was significant enough to advance medical science in a way that no one could have foreseen. Before I let you go here, I would like to give the band Sabaton a shout out here. I sought permission to use excerpts from their song Father in this video, which they graciously gave. However, I decided not to use the song in order to avoid demonetization. For those of you who are interested in the song Father, which is about Fritz Haber, I will put a link in the description to the official video. If you like heavy metal, it's worth a listen. Remember, if you enjoyed this content, please like and subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share with your friends who love weird history. Comment below if you have details to add to this story or just want to express your thoughts on what you've heard. Until next time, this is Seraphim with Me, Myself, and I History signing off.